I investigated apartment 2F die, but I don't think I'm the one who came back. Reddit horror story. They told me apartment 20F was empty when I moved in. That's what the landlord muttered with a distracted flick of his keys, already eyeing the next stack of papers. No tenants in that one. Renovation plans. You'll have peace and quiet, guaranteed. I wasn't looking for anything more than quiet anyway. My life at the time was a burnt-out string of sleepless nights and a job that never paid me on time. The kind of life where silence felt like a luxury, like slipping into a warm bath. Apartment 2V was mine now, and all I wanted was to close the door on the world, drown in stillness, and let time forget about me. But the thing about silence is, it's never quite what it promises to be. It has layers. And sometimes beneath that hush, something else breathes. From the first night, I noticed things. Not sounds exactly, more like a suggestion of movement. Like someone shifting behind a curtain when you glance away. I chalked it up to the new building creaking, old pipes, a thin wall maybe, until the shadows began to stretch across the hallway from underneath the door of 20F. That was the first time I hesitated, because you can't rationalize shadows that move like they know you're watching. You can't explain light behaving like it's afraid. I told myself it was a neighbor, someone squatting maybe, or a contractor coming in late to check the plumbing. I even knocked on the door once. Light taps, nothing aggressive. The hallway swallowed the sound like it had no interest in echoing back. No response. The door looked normal. Beige paint, a cheap brass number, 22F, stuck slightly crooked to the center. There was no peephole. No sign of life. But at night, the line of light beneath it stayed unbroken, soft and yellow and constant. Too constant, like a lamp that never shut off, like someone who never slept. A week passed. My insomnia had morphed from a familiar enemy to something new, something feral. I was getting only minutes of sleep at a time. Sometimes I would wake up and feel like I'd never even closed my eyes. And always when I stepped into the hallway, 2F's light remained unchanged. I stopped knocking. I stopped thinking about it. I told myself if the light wants to stay on, it can. I had bigger things to worry about. Rent, groceries, the soft tremble in my hands from too much caffeine and not enough rest. Until the night of the dripping. It was subtle, like a slow leak into a metal pan. I checked my sink dry. My bathroom dry, nothing from the ceiling either. But when I stood at my door and leaned in close, there it was. That tiny, rhythmic drop. Not from my apartment, from 20F. It wasn't water. Not exactly. It had a different tone. A thicker kind of weight behind it. And then, between the drips, something else. A whisper. Not words. Just the shape of breath curling around silence. I stood there frozen, forehead nearly pressed to the doorframe, listening as the whispering began to mimic the dripping until I could no longer tell the two apart. I backed away. I didn't sleep that night. Morning didn't make it better. The light was still there under the door, unchanged. But the whispering had stopped and the dripping too. I left for work with a weight in my chest, like I was forgetting something important. That's when I began keeping track. I started logging the hours the light was on. Which, honestly, was all of them. I even bought a tiny motion sensor and placed it discreetly outside my door. It wasn't high-end, but it picked up movement, and every single night between 2000 m and 300 am, it lit up red. Once. Exactly once per night. Same minute, same second. Like clockwork, like someone opening the door just a crack, or stepping close enough to breathe through it. I began to fantasize about breaking in. I'm not proud of that. But curiosity has a way of rotting logic from the inside out. I'd walk past it, staring at the doorknob, wondering if it would turn if I just tried. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I asked the landlord again, casually. He blinked slowly and said, "He too hef. No one's touched that place in 6 months. Some water damage made it unlivable. We sealed it. You sure you're not hearing the pipes?" I stared at him. "So no workers have gone in." He laughed once awkwardly. "Wouldn't they knock on your door if they had?" "Don't worry, you've got the whole floor to yourself." That sentence bothered me more than it should have. When I got back that night, I found a single envelope taped to my door. No return address. No name. Just the word, S-Tope, all caps. Marker. Sharp, confident strokes. I tore it open. Nothing inside. Just the envelope and that one word. I stared at 20F. The light was still there. I didn't sleep again. By now my days were a blur of gray. I saw my own reflection in the microwave glass and didn't recognize the face looking back. The next day I noticed something else. My reflection had started lagging. It's ridiculous to say, I know. But when I brushed my teeth, I caught it. The reflection of my arm in the mirror lingered just a moment too long after I moved. Just a half second of delay. Enough to register as wrong. I tested it. Small movements, head tilts, blinking. Sometimes it was perfectly normal. Other times, the reflection moved first. I checked my bathroom mirror for smudges. Clean. I tried the mirror in the elevator. Same thing. I thought about going to a doctor, then remembered I didn't even have insurance anymore. That night, the motion sensor blinked twice. I sat against my door, knees to my chest, flashlight in hand. The hallway outside was utterly quiet. No wind, no hum, no footsteps. I killed all the lights and waited. My own heartbeat thudded against the wood. Then, scraping. Soft, a dragging sound, like nails moving slowly across linoleum. My flashlight flicked on. Nothing. I opened the peephole. Just the corridor. Empty. But as I watched, I swear, something passed in front of the hallway bulb, just briefly enough to make it flicker. A shape that didn't match anything human. I slammed the cover shut. I couldn't tell if I was still awake or if I'd finally fallen asleep, and this was the dream that followed. I must have dozed off at some point because I remember the sound that woke me, a knock, but not at my door, at the mirror in the bathroom. 3 soft taps, not random, measured, like someone waiting to be let in. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I stared at the bathroom door from across the apartment, too afraid to even blink. The knocking came again, but this time from the hallway, from 20F, and this time it didn't stop. I stood there for what felt like hours, paralyzed, ears straining against the air as the knocking from 20F went on. Slow, deliberate, unyielding. It wasn't loud, but it had a persistence that dug into my bones, like it wasn't demanding to be answered. It was waiting for me to realize I already had. I inched closer to the door, my back pressed against the cool wall, each knock sensing with the tremble in my chest. I don't know what I expected to see when I looked through the peephole again. Maybe a person, maybe nothing. But what I didn't expect, what shouldn't have been possible, was to see myself. Standing there in front of 20F was me, not a reflection, not a shadow, me. Same messy hair, same oversized hoodie, same scar above the eyebrow from when I fell off my bike at age 7. I jerked away from the peephole so hard I almost dropped to the floor. My mouth went dry. I forced myself back, one slow glance. Gone. The hallway was empty again. The motion sensor blinked a third time. I didn't sleep again. I sat on my kitchen floor until sunrise, eyes fixed on the mirror on the far wall. I covered it with a blanket, but it didn't help. I still felt it. Like it was watching me from underneath, breathing against the cloth, waiting. Something had shifted. The rules had changed. What used to just feel wrong had become undeniably wrong. The next day, I skipped work. I wasn't going to be productive anyway. I started researching. Not ghosts. I wasn't ready to go full paranormal just yet. I looked up stories about doppelgangers, mirror anomalies, people seeing versions of themselves. There were entire forums filled with stories, some obviously fake, some disturbingly believable. I learned about Capgras delusion, where people believe their loved ones have been replaced by identical imposters. But what I was dealing with wasn't someone else looking like me. It was me, standing where I hadn't been, and it had looked right at the peephole, like it knew I'd be watching. That evening, I did something reckless. I waited until it was nearly midnight, then grabbed my spare keys and a thin crowbar I'd borrowed from the janitor's closet a week before, when I was still trying to convince myself I'd never use it. I stepped into the hallway, knees barely holding me upright, and made my way to 2F. Up close, the air felt thicker, like I was breathing through wool. The door looked the same. Harmless. But I wasn't fooled. I reached out slowly, heart pounding. The doorknob was cold. Too cold. I turned it locked. Of course, I slipped the thin edge of the crowbar into the crack and gently worked it along. I expected resistance, the kind that screams breaking and entering. But instead, it gave way easily, too easily, like something inside wanted me to come in. The door creaked open into blackness, not just darkness. An absence. The light from the hallway seemed to stop at the threshold, refusing to enter. I should have stopped. I should have closed it right then and walked away. But I didn't. I pulled my phone from my pocket, turned on the flashlight, and stepped inside. The air was colder than I imagined, and dry, so dry it felt like it stole the moisture from my eyes. The apartment was wrong. That's the only word for it. The layout was identical to mine, but everything felt reversed. The kitchen was on the wrong side. The window blinds were on the wrong wall. The space itself seemed mirrored, as if someone had recreated my apartment using a photograph that had been flipped. But it was more than that. The walls pulsed faintly, like they weren't quite solid, like they were breathing in slow, shallow waves. I moved further in, each step muffled like I was walking on fabric. The living room was empty. No furniture, no lights, just the faint echo of my own breath. Then I saw it. A mirror, standing freely in the center of the room, unsupported. It was tall, almost floor to ceiling. Its frame was impossibly thin and black, like it had been drawn in with ink. I approached, flashlight shaking in my grip. When I looked into it, I didn't see the room behind me. I didn't see the hallway. I didn't even see myself. I saw my apartment, not the one I was standing in, the real one. 2E. It was lit perfectly, and in it I was sitting on the couch. Reading. Asleep even. But that wasn't me. I was here, which meant I stumbled back. The reflection in the mirror blinked once, slowly, then looked up, right at me. I turned to run. The hallway behind me was gone. In its place was a dark stretch of corridor that stretched too far, too long. My flashlight flickered. I tried to retrace my steps, heart pounding against my ribs like it wanted out. The walls narrowed. The floor began to tilt slightly. I was losing direction, losing gravity, losing sense. A sound behind me. A step. No, not quite a step. A drag, like something pulling itself forward, finger by finger. I ran. I must have stumbled out of 2F eventually. I don't remember how. One moment I was falling forward. The next I was back in my apartment, door slamming shut behind me. I checked the hallway. Empty. 2F's door was closed again, light steady beneath it. My motion sensor was blinking red, steady this time. No pause, no brakes, just an unbroken pulse. I turned to the mirror in my own apartment. It was empty. No reflection. No light. Nothing. That night, I scrubbed my walls with bleach, not because they were dirty, but because I felt something growing there. A presence, like the walls had eyes, like they remembered where I'd been. I covered all my mirrors, taped black paper over them, even the ones in my phone case. But it didn't stop the feeling. That something had followed me out. Over the next few days, things got worse. My reflection began returning, but not consistently. Sometimes I would walk by a window and see nothing. Other times I'd catch a glimpse of myself, only older, or younger, or wrong. A flicker of a grin when I wasn't smiling, a blink when my eyes were open. It was like it was testing the limits of how far it could push before I noticed. Then came the messages, not texts, not emails, handwritten notes, slid under my door, taped to my fridge, left inside the microwave, all of them written in my handwriting, but I didn't write them. It's better here. You weren't supposed to leave. Mirrors remember. I started hearing footsteps when I walked into the bathroom. My toothbrush moved. My coffee brewed itself once, exactly the way I liked it, before I'd even gotten out of bed. Someone, or something, was moving through my routines, living alongside me, like it was trying to replace me one habit at a time. I began staying with a friend across town. I didn't tell them why, just said I needed a break. But every night, even miles away, I would find something from 20F. A strand of hair on my borrowed pillow. A folded envelope with that same word, SDOP. Once, I found a mirror in their guest bathroom I know wasn't there before, and in it, I saw my own apartment reflected back. Not theirs, mine. It was seeping through. I went back one last time. I had to. I told myself I would burn the mirror, if I could, smash it, close whatever portal I'd opened. I dressed in thick clothes, goggles, ridiculous armor for a ridiculous mission. But I was desperate. I approached the door to 2F. It was ajar. The light beneath it was gone. I pushed it open. The apartment was empty. No mirror. No walls. Just darkness, endless, swallowing darkness. And then, one step behind me, followed by a voice that wasn't mine but knew how to sound like me. It whispered, "Now it's your turn." And the door slammed shut. I don't know how long I was in there. Time doesn't work inside 20F, not the way it should. Minutes don't stack into hours. They fall sideways, loop, dissolve. I remember blinking and seeing flashes. Me as a child, me as I am now, me older and twisted like a wax figure left too close to a fire. I remember running down endless corridors that curved back into themselves, like a snake devouring its own tail. Each door I opened led back to the same room with the same mirror, but each time the reflection grew more unfamiliar. First, it was just subtle things, a different lamp, a crack on the wall I didn't have, a clock ticking backward. Then came the reflection of me, but not moving like me, blinking before I blinked, standing when I sat, laughing with its mouth closed. It was studying me, learning. I screamed once, just to see what would happen. Nothing echoed. My voice died mid-air, swallowed whole. That silence felt personal, like the apartment itself was punishing me for trying to fight it. I pounded on the walls until my fists bruised, but they only shimmered, rippling like the surface of black water. I had the horrible realization that this place wasn't built with walls, it was built with memories. Mine, twisted, restructured, used as bricks for a cage I'd wandered into willingly. Then I saw the door. Not the one I came through. Another door, far down a hallway that shouldn't have existed. It pulsed softly like it had a heartbeat. I walked toward it. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have hope either. Just the instinct that whatever was behind it was different. Maybe final. The hallway narrowed as I approached, the ceiling pressing down, floor rising, forcing me into a crawl. And when I reached it, the door opened on its own. Inside was me again, sitting in a chair facing away. I knew it wasn't a mirror. The angles were wrong. The lighting was flat. I stepped forward. The copy didn't move. I circled slowly, every hair on my body standing up. Its skin was pale, too smooth, like something molded from memory but left unfinished. The eyes were open but blank, reflecting nothing. Its mouth moved soundlessly, as though practicing words it didn't understand. I leaned in, mesmerized, and then it looked at me. Not a turn, not a blink, just suddenly aware, like the flick of a switch inside a dead appliance. The eyes sharpened, took shape, mirrored mine perfectly. The mouth stopped moving and curled into a smile. I stepped back. It stood height. Same stance, but not me. Too precise. Too eager. It raised a hand and mimed knocking. 3 soft taps in the air. My blood ran cold. I turned and ran. The corridor behind me was gone again, replaced with a staircase spiraling downward, impossibly long. I descended. The walls grew narrower, but something pushed me on. Panic, maybe, or the fading grasp on who I even was. I passed rooms where versions of me lived lives I didn't recognize. One sat in a pristine apartment filled with awards I never won. Another cried in a corner next to an urn labeled Mum. Though my mother was still alive. At least I thought she was. Every scene was like a temptation. An offer. "You can stay here," they whispered without words. "But you can be this." But I kept going. Finally, I reached the bottom. The floor was smooth obsidian, reflecting 1,000 fragmented versions of myself. In the center stood the mirror. The same one. It waited like an open wound. And in it, I saw my apartment again. 2E, but not as it was. It was brighter, warmer. There were plants I never bought, a rug I always meant to get, and me moving confidently through it, lobbing into a phone, eating something I didn't cook, living. I watched in horror as this version of me walked to the door, opened it, and greeted someone. My landlord. A nod. A handshake. "You've settled in well," I imagined him saying. 2F was the right choice. I reached out toward the glass. The reflection froze, turned, smiled, and spoke. "Stay here, I'll take it from here." I pulled back, but the glass pulled forward, stretching, warping, dragging me in. My reflection's hand burst through like liquid mercury, wrapping around my wrist. Cold, so cold, I screamed, pulling back, but it only smiled wider. I reached with my free hand into my pocket, where I'd forgotten I placed the crowbar from earlier. My fingers wrapped around it. I swung. The mirror shattered, the world convulsed. Light exploded from every crack. The obsidian floor cracked beneath me. The air screamed, not sound, just pure pressure. I covered my head as shards of reflected life rained down. And then... nothing. I woke up on the floor of my own apartment, 2E, alone. Morning sunlight poured through the window. Real sunlight. I felt it. Warm. Heavy. Not the sterile glow from that other place. My mirrors were back. Whole, but covered, thank God. I sat there for hours, unsure if I'd really escaped. If it had let me go. Or if I was just in another version now. I checked the hallway. The door to 20F was gone. Not closed. Gone. Just smooth, unbroken wall. Like it had never existed. I considered telling someone. A friend. A reporter. But what would I say? That I fought a version of myself inside a haunted apartment that rearranged my memories like furniture. That I shattered a sentient mirror and clawed my way back to reality. I said nothing. Weeks passed. Life normalized. Almost. Until one day, while brushing my teeth, I noticed the mirror again. It reflected my bathroom correctly. My movements matched. But when I turned to leave, I saw it for half a second. My reflection lingered. Watching. Smiling. Not at me, but at the mirror behind me. And then it was gone. I ripped it off the wall. Smashed it. But it didn't break. Not even a crack. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room watching the front door. Not for something to come in, but for something trying to get out. I didn't go outside for 3 days. Not because I couldn't, but because I was terrified of what I might bring with me. The air in my apartment had changed. Heavier, yes, but also watchful, like it had grown a pair of lungs and was holding its breath. Every sound set me off: the hiss of the radiator, the slow hum of the fridge, even the distant footsteps from the floor above. All of it became suspect. Sentient. Threatening. I tore the mirror off the wall again, this time dragging it out into the hall and covering it with an old bedsheet, then ducked, taping every edge down until it looked a wrapped corpse leaning against the drywall. But the moment I shut my door, I swore I heard it laughing, quiet and intimate, like it had been waiting for the privacy. I stopped answering my phone. The texts kept coming anyway, but not from anyone I knew. At first, just short sentences. "We're not done. She's still inside. You left someone behind." Then came photos. Not of me, but of my apartment, taken from strange angles, impossible angles. One from inside my closet, one from behind the bathroom mirror, and one from over my bed, taken while I slept. I checked the metadata, but there was nothing. No timestamp. No source. Just void. Paranoia consumed me. I unplugged everything, the TV, the router, even the microwave. I turned off the lights and lived by candlelight, as if shadows obeyed different rules when born from flame. I slept in short bursts, if at all, and started recording myself at night with a second-hand camcorder I picked up at a pawn shop across town. The first few nights, the tapes were blank. Just me tossing and turning, muttering in my sleep. But then on the fifth night, I found it. At 3:17 a.m., the video cut for half a second. Just a stutter like an old VA's hiccuping. But when the feed resumed, I was sitting upright in bed, eyes open, unblinking. I stared straight ahead for a full 6 minutes, not moving, not breathing, not even blinking. Then I spoke. A whisper, barely audible, but unmistakably not my voice. Higher pitched, like someone pretending to be me, mouthing lines rehearsed in front of a mirror. "I don't belong here," it said. "But neither do you." I watched the tape a dozen times. I memorized every twitch, every breath, every unnatural pause. I never remembered any of it. But that phrase, it looped in my head like a song you can't unhear. I started talking to myself, out loud, just to test if my voice still sounded like mine. Sometimes it did. Other times, there was a hesitation, a slight echo, a delay like my voice was coming from a second mouth just out of view. I visited the landlord again. Same man, same musty office that smelled like rust and mold. I asked him directly, "What was Tuhef? What is it?" He stared at me longer than he should have. Not confused, afraid, he leaned back, picked up a cigarette he never lit and said, "We don't number it anymore. You shouldn't talk about it." I pressed him. He waved me off. "Doesn't help to know," he said. "That place copies things, people. But not right away. First it watches, then it waits, then it builds." That was the last thing he said to me before he stood and left the room. When I got back home, the sheet I had taped over the hallway mirror was gone. No torn duct tape, no remnants. Just gone. And the mirror was back on my wall, clean centered, smiling. It had returned on its own, like it had only gone for a walk and decided to come home. I stared into it for hours. At first, nothing strange, just me. Red eyes, pale skin, thinner than I remembered. Then, without warning, my reflection raised its hand, and I hadn't. It pressed its palm to the glass, inviting me to match it. Against my will, I stepped closer, raised my hand. The contact was instant, cold, waxy, like touching the hand of a mannequin. And then I heard something on the other side of the mirror. A sound I've never heard before or since. It wasn't words. It was something older. Like breath learning how to shape thought. Like language at the moment of birth. Then a whisper. This time inside my skull. "Let me finish what you couldn't." I staggered back, breathing hard. Something inside me cracked then. Not physically, but mentally. Emotionally. Reality split slightly at the edges like fabric pulled too tight. I remember laughing. Not because anything was funny, but because it was the only response I had left. I smashed the mirror with my bare fist. Glass and blood everywhere. My reflection didn't break. It just stood behind the cracked surface, untouched, eyes wide with anticipation. I locked myself in the bathroom and cried until I felt empty. Then the phone rang. Not my cell, the landline, the one I never used and never plugged in. I answered it, static at first. Then a voice, mine again but older, wiser, broken. "You have to let me out. She's almost finished with you." I hung up. The line rang again. I ripped it out of the wall. The next morning, I found a second me in the kitchen, standing there like it had always belonged, wearing my clothes, eating my food, reading my book. It looked up and smiled. "You're late," it said, then vanished like smoke sucked out a window. I tore the apartment apart looking for it. Behind furniture, inside closets. I unscrewed the vents, ripped up floorboards, even opened the walls behind the bathroom tiles. Nothing. But I could feel it, like a second heartbeat behind mine. Like every time I blinked, it came a little closer. The whispers grew louder. Now they weren't just from the mirrors. They came from the drain, from the outlets, from the folds in the curtains. Everywhere I turned, I caught a glimpse of myself in the wrong place, doing the wrong thing. Once, I saw myself outside the window watching. I live on the 6th floor. I started sleeping during the day and staying up all night with every light in the house turned on. I played white noise through speakers in every room, hoping it would drown out the whispers. But they didn't stop. They just started whispering with the white noise, sensing to the hums and static, transforming hiss into words. You left her. She remembers. She wants to trade. Trade. That word stuck to me like tar. Trade what? Trade who? I started dreaming of a girl, always the same. Pale skin, long black hair. No eyes, just deep, dark sockets filled with writhing reflection. In the dream, she sat in a chair inside 20F's mirrored room, not moving, just waiting. And every time I got close enough to speak, I'd wake up with blood under my nails and the taste of glass in my mouth. Eventually, I went back. I had to. I packed a bag, mirrors wrapped in foil, holy water I wasn't sure was real, a hammer, and a notebook filled with my memories in case I forgot who I was. I broke into the wall where 2F used to be. Behind the plaster was a metal door. No handle, just a slot for a hand. I pressed mine against it. It opened. What lay beyond wasn't an apartment. It was a cathedral of reflections. Endless rooms, each one a copy of mine. Distorted and populated with versions of me, happy, broken, monstrous. Some didn't notice me. Others clawed at the walls, begging to be let out. One screamed until its throat tore open and kept screaming silently. And through it all, I walked toward the center. Towered her. She waited for me in the room I recognized, the one from before. The mirror stood unbroken. The girl in the chair turned slowly. She had my face, and she wept. You left me, she said. You made me watch. Then she offered me a key to the one door I'd never found, the door out. But one must stay, she whispered. One always stays. I stared into the mirror. There were now two of me reflected. One broken, one whole, and one of us would not be leaving. I stood frozen at the threshold of that final room, the air trembling around me like a membrane about to tear. The girl, my reflection, my twin, my shadow, held out the old iron key in a hand so pale it looked sculpted from moonlight. Behind her, the mirror pulsed faintly, its surface alive, shimmering like liquid mercury. And in that surface, I saw two versions of myself, one staring back with wide, frightened eyes, and one smiling calmly, knowingly, like it had been waiting for this moment all along. One would stay. That was the rule. That had always been the rule. A trade. A replacement. A loop completing itself. I stepped forward, the floor creaking beneath my feet like it too had a heartbeat, and took the key from her hand. It was cold. Heavy. Too real to be part of a dream, yet too surreal to belong to the world I thought I'd known. The girl didn't speak again. She just lowered her hand and tilted her head as if observing an animal she knew would never understand the cage it was in. I looked behind me at the cathedral of reflections. Dozens of rooms, hundreds of versions of me trapped in their own loops, each fighting a different war with the same enemy. Some had gone mad. Others had given in, living lives of pretend, playing house in this place that mimicked reality, but lacked its soul. I wouldn't end up like them. I couldn't. The door was simple. A plain white rectangle with no knob, no hinges, only a thin slot at its center, shaped perfectly for the key. My hand trembled as I raised it. Before the metal slid into place, I paused. One last look at her. The girl, the echo, the ghost. Her mouth moved again, but this time there was no sound, just a silent plea, or maybe a warning. I turned the key, and everything went silent. Not quiet. Silent. A vacuum of sound that pressed against my eardrums like a scream in reverse. Light flooded the room, white and hot and absolute. I shut my eyes, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if I was falling or floating or being erased. There was no sense of motion, only transition, like being rewritten line by line. When I opened my eyes again, I was home. My apartment. 2E morning sunlight painted the walls in soft gold. Birds chirped outside. Distant traffic murmured below. The mirror was gone. No cracks, no blood, just clean, empty wall. My furniture was back in place. My fridge hummed. My coffee maker blinked red, waiting patiently. It felt real, tangible, like reality had been rebooted and I was back where I belonged. I stood there for a long time, afraid to move. Then came the knock, 3 soft taps at the door. Not frantic, not threatening, just familiar. I opened it slowly. No one was there, but on the ground sat a box, small, wrapped in faded brown paper. No name, no address. I carried it inside and unwrapped it cautiously. Inside was a mirror, framed in the same thin black as the one from 20F. A note rested on top, written in delicate cursive that mirrored my own handwriting perfectly. For when you forget. I nearly dropped it. I shoved the box into the back of my closet, buried under winter coats and suitcases I hadn't opened in years. I told myself it was over, that I'd beaten it, that I'd escaped. But you don't escape something like 2F. You survive it. For a while, weeks passed. My life returned to something resembling normal. I went back to work. I laughed with coworkers. I ordered pizza. I watched old movies. I forced routines to feel real again, but little things began to slip. My reflection blinked twice when I blinked once. I found photographs on my phone I didn't take. Me at a park I hadn't visited, wearing clothes I didn't own. My voice on voicemail messages I never recorded. One day, I came home to find my plants watered. But I don't own plants. I stopped trusting mirrors. I began avoiding my reflection. I wore sunglasses indoors just to block my own eyes from meeting mine. I turned off screens when I wasn't using them. I taped over webcams. I lived in fragments, trying to glue together the truth with rituals and noise. Then one night, I received a letter under my door, handwritten. No envelope. It read, "Thank you for switching." She's very happy now. The handwriting was mine, but older, more confident. The next morning, I found a stranger in the hallway, a woman I'd never seen before, standing in front of the smooth blank wall where 2F used to be. She touched the plaster gently, tracing invisible patterns. I asked if she was lost. She smiled without turning around and said, "You're the one who got out," then walked away. I checked the building records again. There never was a 2F. Not on paper, not in blueprints. 2E was listed as having a double-width floor plan. No adjoining unit, no shared walls, nothing to explain what I experienced. But I remember it, every second. And sometimes I hear her still, late at night. A soft breath from the closet, a whisper from the sink, a shape behind the glass of my television screen that shouldn't be there. And the worst part, sometimes I hear my own voice. Not from my throat, from somewhere else in the apartment, mimicking, practicing, becoming. I've started seeing cracks again, not in the walls, in reality. A friend once told me mirrors are gateways, but they only open when you forget who you are. And lately I've been forgetting little things. What day it is, where I put my keys, whether I really closed the mirror box or just imagined it. And sometimes when I look into my own eyes in passing, I see something waiting behind them. Patient, smiling. So if you ever move into a building and the unit next to yours is empty, always empty. If the light under the door never changes, if you hear footsteps that don't belong, whispers without mouths to shape them, or see yourself where you aren't supposed to be, don't investigate. Don't open the door. Don't look in the mirror. Because once 2F notices you, it never really lets go. It just waits, and when you finally slip, when your mind starts to wander and you begin to doubt your own thoughts, it opens and offers you a choice. One goes in, one gets out. And sometimes the version that returns isn't the one that left. Enjoyed the video? Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell so you never miss an update.